It's early in 2017. What are you looking forward to this year? I mean, I know that you're a purist and you love, I mean, one of the reasons I think people love your style is that you commentate sort of the same way on the undercard. You have the same level of excitement as you do, when the main card starts. But there's got to be a few fights out there potentially this year, right? Where you're hoping, I hope that comes together. I would love to call that again. What are those matchups for you? Do you got any?
Well, I really want to see Yoel Romero get a shot at the title.
Good luck.
I know he's waiting. Yeah, I know. I mean, he's waiting right now for this, what I think is an interesting fight between Michael Bisping and George St. Pierre. I think that's an interesting fight. I don't like it in terms of the hierarchy of the division. I think that as far as the division goes, it's not good at all. I mean, it sort of hijacks the whole situation.
So how are you gonna feel when after St. Pierre wins the title, he fights Anderson Silva?
I don't think he's going to, and I don't think he's going to. I mean, I think if he wins the title, I think he's probably going to vacate it and fight someone else, another big money fight.
Yeah.
If I had to guess,
yeah,
I definitely don't know. But if I had to guess, I would think he's probably going to do that.
Well, when they're sitting up there at the press conference, I actually asked Dana White that exact question. Do you have any reservations about booking somebody to a title fight that he might not want to defend? And Dana White basically told me that, hey, we've had these conversations. We have plans. We're just not telling you them right now. My question to you is, Joe, my question to you is, and I guess that response speaks for itself to a certain extent.
That sounds like something my dad would say. We're not telling you. We know how to do it. You shut up and go to bed.
How do you feel about all this? It's something that we've been talking about a lot this year. There's interim titles everywhere you look. There's guys chasing money fights. Yeah,
I don't like it.
You think it's a slippery slope, and are you actually concerned? 100%. I guess. Are you concerned with the direction the sport's going?
I'm not concerned because there's great fighters, and you get them together and you make great fights. I'm not concerned at that, but from a purist point of view, and from someone who feels like, look, if you're going to have a champion and you're going to have these divisions where one man rules over the division, there should be a very clear hierarchy. I mean, this was something that really bothered me about the Ronda Rousey-Amanda Nunes fight. I'm like, look, you're doing all these amazing promos. They're fantastic, but you're only highlighting this one fighter. You're only highlighting Ronda Rousey. Like, the other woman is the champion. She's the champion of the world. And that's a very important distinction. And that has to be respected. And if you have a champion and you have, all these people that are waiting in line to get a shot at that champion, the person who is perceived to be the best in that division is the one who should be fighting the champion next. The champion should always be fighting the number one available challenger. Right now, that is Yoel Romero.
Yeah.
I get that George St. Pierre's come back, and I get that Michael Bisping feels like he deserves a big money fight, and I agree with him. Michael's had a long career in the UFC, and he's a great fighter, and against all odds, became the UFC middleweight champion on a very short notice fight against a guy who had already beat him in the first round, and Luke Rockhold, and winds up knocking him out. All props to him. Comes back, he defends against Dan Henderson. Beats him in a decision. Good for him. It's great. I think I see Michael Bisping's point that he deserves that big money fight.
Yeah.
But as a person who deeply respects the position of champion, I think if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna do this whole interim title thing, and you're gonna have guys come back after being out of the sport for 3 years and get a shot right at the title, why have championships at all? Ooh, I swore. What happens when you swear? You guys have a beeper over there?
Yeah, we got. You'll beep there.
All right. My apologies. I guess so used to doing podcasts. But why have a champion at all? It just set up great fights. And if you're just setting up great fights, well, that's a great fight.
Yeah.
Bisping versus GSP is a great fight. But if you're going to have a title, this is the champion of the world, then the champion should be defending his title against the number one challenger in the world. And that right now is Yoel Romero. But
100%.
More people by far know who George St. Pierre is and Yoel Romero, so Michael Bisping will make more money. It's a lucrative fight for George St. Pierre to come back to. I think WME and whatever this. I mean, what do they call the company now? It's not. Do they still call it Zuffa? I should probably know this, huh? Work for them.
What does your check say when you get it?
I don't look at it.
Yeah, I think it's Zuffa.
I think he's got direct deposit on that.
Yeah, I'm busy, but I think that look, there's two ways I look at it. One, I look at it like, man, I can't wait to see what happens. George St. Pierre versus Michael Bisping. Yeah, I'm down. If that was on pay-per-view, 100% I would buy that.
Yeah.
Like if I was just sitting at home and you told me that Bisping was going to fight George St. Pierre tonight, I'd be like, all right, this is great. Get the popcorn. Let's get the party started. But when it comes to someone who respects the position of champion, well, the champion should really be fighting the number one challenger. And, Michael says that he's going to fight George, and then 6 weeks later he said he'll be ready to fight Yoel Romero right afterwards. But I wouldn't believe that. That was Yoel Romero. When was the last time anybody ever did that? Has anybody ever defended the title against a former world champion and an all-time great, and then 6 weeks later defend the title again? I mean, come on, get out of here.
I'm sure that Michael Bisping is going to get the biggest payday of his career and want to hop right back into camp for a guy like Yoel Romero. That seems very reasonable to me.
I see him drunk in Vegas and those in like an English flag underwear, having a great time.
Yep.
I think he's going to make a giant payday, and that's good for him. I get it. There's a real argument. There's a real argument that there shouldn't be champions. I've heard this argument before, and I've entertained it, and I've actually brought it up myself. That really what we need, instead of this idea of a belt, is just match the best fighters against the best fighters and have these cards. Like if you had an amazing card like UFC 200, but there was no title fights, you didn't call them title fights. You just had the fight. If you just had Conor McGregor versus Rafael dos Anjos or whoever it would be, do you really? How much is that? How much is that title of champion weighing on your decision whether or not you're going to be enjoying it, or whether or not it's going to be interesting, or whether or not it's important?
I actually think it's extremely important because when you look at like a matchup like McGregor and Rafael dos Anjos, why are they big? It's dos Anjos because he won the title. He was considered a champion. He was considered the best of his weight class. With Conor, even as he was coming up with his personality and everything that went with it and the great knockouts, he was chasing a dominant champion in Jose Aldo. That was always sort of the underlying story. And that's why I get a little worried about the future of the sport. I get it. I get why they're putting on big fights. And I can't even say that if it wasn't my company and I was wearing the suits and I was, trying to make numbers meet, that I wouldn't be doing the exact same thing. But I think long term, if you take away the significance of your titles, you're taking away a lot of what keeps the UFC running. It's just that storyline of like, this is what these guys are going for. They're going for that one. That is the end of the tunnel. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's what they're all chasing. So all the storylines sort of play off of that. And then once they won it, then you can create those fun fights. Like GSP, Michael Bisping, if there's no title attached to it, everyone's still watching that fight. But you have to sort of get there first. You have to be those, like, you can sell that storyline of two former champions or two champions, super champions, whatever the case is. I still think it's a sport that's based on being number one at the top. And then those storylines start to percolate from that.
I agree with you, and I also disagree with you. I agree with you in that I think that, it is a great thing to be the champion. And when Conor McGregor, when he beat Eddie Alvarez and he wanted those two belts on him, and he wanted to be the champ.
Yeah.
He had this this idea in his mind. I get it. I get why people are interested in that. But on the other hand, I look at it and I just want to see interesting fights. On the other hand, what is it? What's important to me? I mean, maybe I'm a little jaded, or maybe I'm just like too deep in the sport. But I don't. When you have things like interim titles, as soon as you have an interim title, and then you have an interim title like they were going to do with Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, that's a fight where the guy just won the title. I mean, he just won the title a couple months ago. And then all of a sudden you're having an interim title? Like, what are you doing? Like, what is – either the guy vacates the title or he doesn't. Like, this whole interim thing, like, I don't understand what an interim title – I get an interim title if the guy's injured. And yet, like the Dominic Cruz situation, he has a significant layoff, and he wants a – they want to give someone else a chance to establish the fact that if Dominic Cruz cannot come back, this is your new champion. Or the John Jones situation, where they stripped him of his title, and you have this, this situation where when he comes back, they give him a shot at the interim title. I get all those things. I get it. I mean, it makes sense to me. But what I want to see is interesting and exciting fights. That's all I want to see. And it doesn't matter. John Jones and Daniel Cormier fought tomorrow, and there was no title on the line. The UFC just decided, look, forget titles. It wouldn't mean anything to me. I'm just curious as to see how they're going to match up. Same with the new fight with him and Rumble. I just want to see how they match up. That's what I want to see.